Global launch is 2 or 3 days away if you're playing on mobile or PC, which means we got to get our builds ready for whatever class we're playing. We got to know what stats, what set items, what legendary gems, what skills to use, all of that good stuff. And when we're actually leveling, to give us a smooth leveling process, as well as being able to get ready for those group content, Elder Rifts, Challenge Rifts, things like that, as well as some PvP builds, some early game PvP builds. And obviously all of this will evolve over time. I will be doing the other 5 classes. I'm going to be playing the Crusader, so I started with Crusader. Let's jump into it. So let's start out this build with the Crusader's stat priorities. Now, it's important for us to get the right pieces with the right stats before we start upgrading and investing all this stuff into our gear pieces. If we get the wrong stats, we're going to be super ineffective. When we're talking about legendary items in this game, they're going to have 1 to 3 stats on them. Most commonly, it's going to be 1 to 2. Very rarely will you find that third stat, but they're going to be all super valuable. Specifically the top 3 here, which I have ranked, and we're going to go over all of that. But keep in mind that when we're looking at gear pieces, I'd much rather have the proper stat and the improper skill upgrade over a correct skill upgrade and the improper stats, because the stats are going to give you much more valuable in terms of actually effectiveness in combat. So what are the stats are we looking for? Well, we're going to be looking for strength for number 1. It's going to give us extra damage. Just going to be able to amplify all of our damaging skills, which pretty much every class in this game is going to do a decent amount of damage. So strength's going to be super important for the Crusader here, especially when we're talking about solo farming. If you have low strength, you don't have a lot of damage, you can get through it much easier in group play. But for solo, you're definitely going to want some damage on your Crusader. Second one's going to be fortitude. It's going to give us 0.1 armor and 0.1 armor penetration per stat effect. Now, I do want to mention that each one of these is going to give us combat rating per point, so keep that in mind. But the armor here is actually going to give us extra block chance, which when you block, you get 20% mitigation of damage. Armor penetration is actually going to give us extra critical hit damage. So both of these are actually really strong for the Crusader. One, because the Crusader actually blocks a ton with this primary attack, which we'll go over in just a moment. Then the armor penetration is going to give us critical hit damage, which it really works well with our Holy Banner skill, which is going to give us max crit rate. So definitely going to look for those ones. Next up, it's going to be Vitality here. And I think Vitality is going to be super important because Vitality gets more valuable the more effective HP you have, essentially. Or rather, the more effective HP you have, the more tanky you are. And HP gets more valuable, the more it actually can be... the amount of damage can be mitigated by other circumstances, like blocking, like these other things. The health that you actually have gets more valuable. So in terms of Crusader, the Vitality is going to be a very important stat. It's going to be a very important stat for a lot of classes out there, just to avoid getting one shot in endgame PvE content. But the next one's going to be Willpower. Willpower isn't super important for the Crusader. We're going to get that combat rating, like I said, for all of them. But the potency is going to increase harmful effect duration, which could be useful, and the resistance is going to do the opposite of that. So very interesting here, but not super impactful. Intelligence isn't going to give us anything in terms of actually amplifying the Crusader here. So really just ignore this stat. If you get it, it's kind of like a blank stat. You're going to get a combat rating out of it, which is nice. So if it is a 3-stat item and you get intelligence as your 3rd stat, and the other 2 are solid, then definitely pick that up over a 2-stat item. But it's not going to really get you much in terms of increased effectiveness, because combat rating does have a cap in both PvP and PvE. That being said, let's talk about our set items. So for those of you that don't know, these set items are the secondary gear pieces, as you can see here, that you are going to slot onto your characters. You're going to both have your 6 legendary items and then your 6 secondary items. The secondary item set that we're going to want to look for is Isatar Imbued. This set is going to be absolutely insane for the Crusader. As you can see, specifically from the 4 set items equipped, you can see damage dealt increased by 2.5% for every 5% increase in your movement speed. This means that when we mount up on our Celestial Warhorse, we're going to have 12 procs this, or 12 5%ers, and that equates to a ton of extra damage from the damage dealt increased. We're definitely going to want to run this. On top of that, when we're going to be defeating enemies, we're going to get more movement speed, which is going to add additive to our Celestial Warhorse. And then if you happen to get the 6th set effect, which is okay, you can go ahead and pick up this. Each time you defeat an enemy, you gain a 10% chance to get an orbiting soul orb. So that's going to be solid, but definitely the 4 set items effect is going to be massive for the Crusader. Definitely unparalleled. There are some other sets that I could recommend. The one that extends buff duration, although I'm not sure how the banner interacts with that. I don't think that's actually a buff, because people have to be in the radius, so I don't think you can extend it. Maybe you can extend the skill duration, but that's through the legendary item, so I'm not sure if that works exactly how I want it to. So I definitely recommend just prioritizing the Isotara Imbued, especially since Draw and Quarter our Warhorse is going to be the primary skill we're going to use for every single build. So let's jump into some of the skills that I think are must-haves for every single build. So every build is going to have a primary attack and then 4 additional skills. The primary attack that I suggest you run in every single build, I do not suggest that you run the other primary attack. This one is going to be Punish. Why? Well, you're just going to be striking people for damage, and you're going to increase your block chance by 30% for 2 seconds, which is insane. Very good. The ultimate ability is also very solid here. You're going to be getting a AoE damage in front of you, as well as increasing the block chance bonus, and every ultimate ability on the primary attack is going to give you a shield, so that's going to be nice as well. Next up is going to be the Draw and Quarter, as I mentioned. This Celestial Warhorse is going to be extremely important for the Crusader. If you're not using this skill, you're not playing the Crusader, this is going to not only give you increased movement speed. I believe the changes based on the data mine is going to be a 60%, and then the Holy Change will bind up to 6 nearby enemies. But you're also going to be able to primary attack while moving. Your primary attack is going to turn into an AoE, if I remember correctly, and it's just going to be overall a massive improvement to your overall damage just from the set items. Just going through the enemies and clearing through the PvE content extremely quickly. It's also great for PvP for running down enemies. Overall, just the core skill for the Crusader. The second one that I'd recommend in terms of your other 4 skills is going to be Spinning Shield. Now, this one may not sound super exciting, but it's going to be your main single target damage skill for the Crusader, because the Crusader does not have a lot of single target damage, if any, and this is going to make up for that a lot. This one's going to be hurling a Spinning Shield, inflicting damage to all enemies in its path. It's going to return to you, pulling enemies in. It's going to have 3 charges. So both these skills can be modified to do way more, and we will be modifying them to do way more, and we'll be going over that in just a moment. Now, Spinning Shield unlocks at level 1, so you can absolutely run this. You're going to use whatever skills you got at level 1, and then as soon as level 15 pops, you're going to pick up that Draw and Quarter, and we're going to be using that all the time. Now, if you're running a solo farming build, we're going to be going over that. We also have a group farming build and a PvP build, so we're going to be going over all the different variations of the Crusader. We're going to be starting with the solo farming build. Now, I only have 2 skills here, and that is because, as I said, we're going to be running these other 3 skills absolutely, no matter what. We absolutely want these ones in addition to these ones when we're going through and building out our builds. Mind you, we're also going to want the set items and the stat priorities still, but we're going to be talking about our legendary items that we're going to be modifying in order to get maximum value out of our solo farming build. So what 2 skills are we running in addition to the other 3? Well, first off, we're going to be running Consecration. Now, this one, it says consecrate the ground around you, dealing damage to all nearby enemies for 6 seconds. Now, we're going to have a legendary item that's going to modify this to get much more value out of it. But the important thing to note is we're going to want to use this Consecration skill before we mount up, because it'll follow us when we're on the horse. Very important that we're doing that skill order. Spinning Shield is going to be used to take out the bosses for a single target damage, and the Falling Sword here is just going to do a ton of AoE damage as well. The Crusader has a ton of AoE damage between Consecration and Falling Sword and the Draw and Quarter. The Spinning Shield is going to be responsible for our single target damage. Falling Sword also gives us another movement ability, but we will be changing that a little bit depending on what we want to run here. Now, this is just going to help us do a bunch of damage. When we're talking about solo farming, the Crusader has a lot of innate survivability in the extra block chance, so extra damage here is very easy to run on the Crusader. So let's talk about some of the legendary items. Now, I have a few here that you could kind of mix and match for the weapons, but the armor pieces here, I would recommend running these over any of the other ones that we have access to. So first one we're going to want to look out for is Many-Eyed Aegis here. It's going to allow our Consecration to move with us. As I was saying, use the Consecration mount up on your horse, and you'll be running through people extremely quickly while also AoE damage them while also proccing your set item effect. So it's going to be massive, massive value. If you happen to get the Awaken effect, it's going to do 10% increased damage. Besieger is another one that's going to be super important. We're going to be modifying our draw and quarter up here to actually give us a bombardment around nearby enemies when we're running through enemies. So now we have another AoE. Next up is going to be Sivket's Advantage. Draw and quarter duration increased by 30%. Instead of being 6 seconds, it's going to be way more. It's going to get an extra 1.8 seconds on top of that. So about 7.8 seconds. Very, very, very nice advantage there. We also have another modification here in Bladed Jambeau. Draw and quarters mount becomes a fiery steed that burns the ground and enemies, but no longer drags enemies. This is super, super nice. So now we're going to have bombardments as well as a fiery path that we're going to be leaving around enemies. So our draw and quarters is just going to be basically a ram that we're going to be running through enemies and just blowing them up with a bunch of AoE damage. Excellent for running through PvE content on your own. Next up is going to be Little Lance. Falling Sword instead causes you to surge forward up to 3 times. So now we've turned our single AoE damage over time that we can reactivate to go towards the sword. But we can now surge forward 3 times, which will allow us to get through dungeons quicker. We can also modify it with Tumult here to allow our Falling Sword to summon blades around it, which will do more damage, but we will remove the movement piece from it. So this is only important when we need more AoE damage. I would prefer Little Lance generally over Tumult. Next up is Pavis of the 10 Wings, and Spinning Shield now spirals around you and does not return. It's going to do basically like a little kind of like a blade that's just going to spin in circles around you and do massive AoE damage, as well as a decent single target damage when you're in melee range of that boss. So overall, I think Pavis is going to be very, very nice if you need a little bit more AoE damage. But if you need more single target damage, I would recommend going for Sinkhole Cross. You're just going to be able to basically put the Spinning Shield at a location and then let it sit there damaging enemies, drop it on the boss, and then boom, you're going to have 3 charges just melting the boss really quickly. Definitely super important. These two are actually, in my opinion, the most important to actually clear out content quickly, as well as Many-Eyed Aegis. Honestly, the Besieger and the Bladed Jambeau are very, very nice as well. Sivket's Advantage, giving that extra duration, is nice for speeding up things as well. So next up is going to be our group farming build, and we're mainly going to be swapping out our damaging AoE skills for buff skills that are going to apply for everyone in the party, but we're going to be modifying them to make sure that we are doing more damage and speeding up content for our allies. First up is going to be the Holy Banner. This one is very, very easy to understand why we're bringing it in. Pull into Holy Banner, lasting for 11.2 seconds, increasing crit chance by 100%, decreasing crit damage, but we will get more crit damage based on crit chance. This will be modified so we can actually carry it on ourselves, and the banner life is equal to ours. So that's super, super important. We can kind of move it around to make sure everyone's getting affected by it, and it'll massively increase our party's damage. Next up is going to be Conjuration of Light. Now, you can kind of ignore this damage immunity. We're actually modifying it so that we actually deal damage with it from a shield that we apply to our allies. So let's talk about our legendary items, because then you'll see the actual true effects of these skills up here. First up is going to be Arrow Keeper. As I mentioned, Holy Banner is going to move with us. We can plop down the Holy Banner and then mount up on our horse and then move around with it. Very, very nice. Justice without favor here. Conjuration of Light now surrounds you and your allies with Holy Fire that continuously damages all nearby allies but no longer prevents damage. This is going to be very nice for those teams with multiple melee classes, but even if you are running only Barbarian and Crusader and double ranged units, it's still going to be nice. Just get your Demon Hunters to position correctly, or Wizards or whatever, to make sure you get some value out of this. This could be changed out, perhaps, if you do not have a ton of melee classes and it's just the Crusader. It really just depends, but if you can get this to work, this is going to be massive, massive value here. Next up, we see the Wind Blessed Pauldrons. Conjuration of Light duration increased by 30%. We're increasing now our AoE damaging. Next up is Squire's Truce. So this one is kind of like a niche effect. I wanted to mention it because I don't know how this is going to work. I've not seen anybody use this legendary item, but it says you can now carry a passenger during draw and quarter. I think that if, depending on if you can have the ally basic attack on the back of you, then this could be an absolutely busted item. Imagine running past a Demon Hunter, having the Demon Hunter pop on your back of your horse, you running through the enemies, Demon Hunter's popping those primary attacks. Maybe they popped Vengeance before they jumped on your horse, and now the Demon Hunter's just clearing through everyone while you're running them through the dungeon and keeping them safe. This could be a massive ability in terms of the Crusader for group play, but if it doesn't work like I think it will, maybe it's going to be completely useless. I'm not quite sure, but I wanted to mention it just so you know to test it out, or if I find it first, I'd definitely be testing out myself. Next up is going to be the Bladed Jambo. Again, just AoE damage that's going to be running through enemies, just like our solo farming build. Little Lance and Tumult are back, allowing us to give a couple of extra dashes, as well as some AoE damage. And then Sinkhole Cross, again, for that single target damage. Single target damage is going to be more important here because your allies are going to make up for your lack of AoE damage if you're missing it. So now you're running more support, just boosting their damage. They're going to take care of all of the enemies, especially if you're running the optimized group composition that I recommend with the Barbarian, with the Demon Hunter. You're going to be clearing through things without problem. Last up is going to be the PvP build, and then we're going to be going over legendary gems. So this PvP build is obviously early on. There's going to be a ton of future modifications and learning that we will go through. So definitely, we are going to take this with a grain of salt because a lot of people haven't tested it thoroughly, PvP, because the game wasn't out super long, and so this could easily change very, very quickly. But for PvP, I recommend running Falling Sword and Condemn, which is going to be our new skill that we haven't gone over yet. Build up a massive explosion, dealing damage to all enemies after 3 seconds. Activate again to detonate early, dealing less damage. Now, this is going to be much better after a less legendary item that we're going to be going over, but we're going to be going over that soon. So, first up is we're going to be talking about Many-Eyed Aegis. Consecration now moves with you. Now, I put this one in here because I do think that Consecration could be very, very good for us. If we go up here and talk a little bit about Consecration a little bit more, I didn't put the skill in here because I think that the helmets are overall pretty mediocre, but I do think that this one's going to be the best one if we're going to be running Consecration, definitely. So next up is going to be the Iron Suzerain. Condemn now continuously drags enemies toward you. Toward you is going to be super, super nice. I think that Condemn, now you're going to be able to pull everyone in and charge up for the full 3 seconds, dealing massive damage. This is going to be key in terms of CC as well as damage for the PvP build. Next up is going to be Sivket's Advantage. We're going to be using that Draw and Quarter as well, increasing the duration by 30%. That's going to be very important to chase down enemies. Again, I think Squire's Tros can be very, very nice depending on how they work. Again, take it with a grain of salt because we do not know how it works exactly. Next up is the Cavalier's Courtwear. Draw and Quarter now damages enemies when you run over them and knocks them away, but it no longer drags enemies. This is going to be a nice CC skill and just allowing us to just run at people and hit them for damage as well as smacking them with our basic. Next up is going to be the Proof from on high rather. Falling Sword now chains enemies to a location and pulls them to you when activated again. This is going to be really nice with Falling Sword. You're going to be able to slap it down on someone and then pull them towards you. I think that this one could be good depending on how it works entirely. But Little Lance is also going to be very solid as well, basically being able to allow you to chase down enemies again very, very nicely with 3 times charges. Next up is going to be Bowyer's Remorse. I think this could be very, very solid. Spinning Shield now explodes when it strikes an enemy instead of returning, damaging all nearby enemies and knocking them back. Very, very nice legendary item here in just some extra CC. And then Pavis of the 10 Wings is going to be very nice when you're in the thick of things, hitting those melee classes with the spiraling spinning shield. Very, very good. So that is the 3 builds that I'm kind of giving you as an initial selection. I'm going to be having more in-depth once I've gone ahead and tested all the skills out, as many legendary items as I can get my hands on, and some more of these set effects. But let's go over some of the legendary gems before we wrap up the video, because we are going to be getting them through the Battle Pass and some early on. Let's go over some of the set effects that we're going to be looking for. So last up is some of the early and late game legendary gems that I'd be looking out for. Now, I'm not going to go super in depth into each of these gems because I do have a legendary gem explanation video, as well as it's going to be on the Aftershock United spreadsheet. But these are the ones I'd look out for very obvious purposes. They're all pretty much going to increase our damage. This one's going to heal us a little bit. Everlasting Torment is very excellent for dealing extra damage. So is Berserker Eyes, so is Selid's Weakening, so is Fervent Fang, Lightning Core as well. They're all just going to deal extra damage for us and give us easy chances to proc it. Fervent Fang and Selid's Weakening are from the Battle Pass, so definitely take those up a little bit of ranks, a couple of ranks, not a lot. 1 to 2 maybe, just to get the extra stats on them. But I wouldn't rank them up too much because you're going to want to look for these 5-star legendary gems. I do think that Everlasting Torment and Lightning Core are going to be the best for the Crusader, so definitely keep your eye out for those. Next up is going to be the late game 5-star legendary gems. I will go over those a little bit more in depth because they're going to be lasting for you much longer. Next, first up is going to be the Blessing of the Worthy. This is going to give us basically an AoE every few times we take damage every 15 seconds. That's based on our maximum life, 10% of our maximum life to be exact, which is going to be huge amounts of damage in an AoE when we're in the thick of things, which we will be. Blood-Soaked Jade is just going to be a massive gem for any class, but more specifically for the Crusader, it's going to have the additive speed bonus, which will basically combo with our set item effect, giving us more increased damage. So Blood-Soaked Jade is especially good for the Crusader. Seeping Bile, this extra chance to poison will basically spread, deal more AoE damage. Very excellent one for taking out trash. And lastly, the Phoenix Ashes. This is just going to be a massive PvP gem and late game PvE gem, specifically giving us basically a second life. It's going to be huge for PvP just because people are going to have to play around it if people have it. And for PvE, this could be massive handicap in terms of lowering the difficulty of the dungeons and PvE content if you find yourself dying. So that is the legendary gems that I'm going to be looking out for. And overall, that's just going to be the legendary items, the set items, the skills, all that good stuff that I'm going to be looking out for. I do want to mention before I wrap up this video, if you do not have the legendary item for Conjuration of Light, I would not recommend running it because this extra damage immunity is not going to do much because you're probably not going to be dying, but you'll be able to get more value out of another skill, especially something like Consecration for group farming. That being said, let me know what you think about legendary items for the Crusader. Some of the skills. Did I skip out any legendary item? Did I skip out on any skill? Did I mischaracterize how good Drawing Quarter and Spinning Shield is? Let me know in the comments down below. I'm very interested. Also, set items. Did I miss anything there? Because I know there's a lot of them. That being said, hopefully you enjoyed, and I will see you for the next one.